All right, welcome everybody to the Cracking the Rich Code show. I'm your host, Pete Beskis, and today I've got with me another one of our great authors, Mike Oglesbee. Mike, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Pete. I'm excited to be here to conversate, see what comes up, see what comes out. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're a contributor in our volume 14, and your chapter is called From Surrender to Success: Harnessing My Inner Potential or My Hidden Potential. You're not only just a best-selling author because you're a part of our series, you're also a coach, a hypnotherapist. And what I thought was interesting when I asked for your bio was, you gave me the line that you transform what people struggle with into their biggest strength. I thought that was really cool and unique. Tell me a little bit about your history, what brought you here, and we can dive into how you do that.
So, look, I my whole life I was kind of like a troubled kid. Did really poorly in school. It just didn't challenge me. I just wasn't into it. And, I took the rebellious route. I was one of those. I'd cause a lot of chaos around me and, suffered from a lot of mental illnesses like anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation, addictive behaviors and patterns. Just a really, really tough time, a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, which has actually turned out to be some of my greatest strengths. And so that's really, one of those aspects when I talk about helping people turn their struggles into strengths, understanding that, the stories that a lot of times we're embarrassed of our pasts, of not doing things right or things, not looking so glamorous to other people. But there's a lot of strength in our stories, and that's what's brought me here and given me the ability to help other people. And so through my journey of growth and transformation, I've been able to take those struggles and those sufferings and difficulties throughout my life and turn them into strengths to help other people to achieve, greater levels of their own potential.
And that's I love that. I love hearing that. And I think we all, I'm a big fan of obstacles the way, Stoic kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me is that as we get older, I wish I had these lessons when I was younger. When you
Yeah.
work with people, what are you seeing? Are you seeing more of them being the older, or can we teach younger people so they can
You know,
catch it early? Because I know, I kind of said ahead of time, I think we all did stuff when we were younger that now we're like, oh, maybe that wasn't the smartest move.
yeah. Well, it's kind of mixed. It's interesting because when I first started doing this work, my primary clientele were older people. In fact, they were people that were retired. And I think that happened purposely. I think that there was a lot of wisdom that I needed to gain. And so I was able to learn. And, you know, I always tell my clients this, like, it's not just you learning from me. We're on a journey together. I learn more from my clients than I have ever learned from picking up a book
Mhm.
or stepping into a course or enrolling in college. I've learned so much more from my clients because I'm able to see kind of how life works. You're able to see, kind of those boundaries and those what I call the natural laws. And so, the older generation, um, they have their place, and I work with them here and there, but I've actually found most of my clientele ranges right around in the mid 30s. And I think there's something that happens in those mid 30s when we start to go into that middle age. Um, but I do, I am fortunate enough to be able to work with younger people. I say younger, I don't typically go, below something like an 18-year-old, because when we're in that stage of life, we really, we kind of think we know it all. You know what I mean? Like we don't
Mhm.
really need help. We haven't been through enough pain and we're still just trying to figure things out. So it's all really about me, me, me. And so there's not a whole lot of younger people that I've experienced. I have experienced some, but there's not a whole lot of younger people in those teenage or maybe even those early 20s that are really ready for that change, or at least that they know that they're ready for that change.
Yeah, no, I kind of laugh because I look at, I have children, they're young still, they haven't hit their teens. But even myself as a 20-year-old or, as a teenager, I, you don't know what you don't know, and you think,
Yeah.
everything in front of you is gravy. But what I love about that, and I kind of give that grace to those ages now, because you need that um, uninformed optimism in
Yeah.
order to strike out and do some of the stuff that, when you're 40 or 50, you'd be hesitant or scared to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage people to live. Go make mistakes. Go mess up. Go make some messes. I mean, there's so many lessons in the messes. And so many people I think are trying to do it right. And I think it's just a flawed philosophy. I think that we should embrace the mistakes. We should embrace those difficulties because ultimately I think that those are the things that I guess move us into the positions, into the passions and the things that we're meant to do. So, if someone that's younger, if they're interested in really enhancing their life, then that's great. But if they're not, that's great too, because there's nothing wrong with what we call a late bloomer, someone who has to go through those struggles in life. I just think that there's a stigma about that, but I think that there's a lot of power in just embracing that natural I guess part of life.
Yeah, and well, I'm closing in on 50, and I realize that there's no like you're not even when you think you've settled out, another storm is waiting for you. It's just the nature of
Always.
life. It's like you could have 7 good years where you think nothing's going to change. And then through no fault of your own, circumstances change, things change. And
Yeah.
I always say life punches you in the face, right?
Yes, it
And
will.
you could be doing everything right and still get punched in the face. So talk to me, really give me some examples or some good stories that you have of people who have experienced that adversity and through working with you come on the other side as a strength, as like resilient.
So I'll give you an example of a lady I'm actually currently working with. She just got done battling breast cancer. And through this transformation, and it's really interesting that you kind of talked about how these storms, you could be doing everything right for 5, 7 years, and all of a sudden life will come and it will punch you right in the face, and when you fall, it will kick you a few times. And I think that there's so much power in that. There's so many people, I think they say things like, oh, I don't want to make mistakes. Well, that would be probably the biggest mistake you could ever make, is to not make a mistake. Like, there's a purpose in these storms, right? There's a reason. We're not, I don't believe that we're here at life to just feel good and be happy. I think that there's a bigger understanding that we have to come to and understand the language of life, and those pains and the struggles and the difficulties. They're not here to harm us. They're going to hurt us because that pain moves us. There's a really, really when you understand pain, you understand that it's necessary and that it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing because it moves us out of those areas that maybe we're not meant to be in anymore. And pain is what moves us. It's our greatest motivator. So I have this lady. She just got done battling breast cancer, and she overcame it. And she is starting to realize that her life is not what she thought it was. What she's going back to, she's realizing, is a tumultuous, toxic, really abusive relationship that she's in that she just wasn't aware of before. But when you think about going through something like cancer and something that is life altering, it alters your life for a reason. It alters your perspective so that you can gain a new one. And so now she's coming to these realizations that she's been under this kind of this control, if you will, under the hand of this person. And, with this new sense of life that she's gained through facing, the potential, death, she's starting to gain her independence. She's starting to gain her, what I call, I work on a philosophy of empowerment. So she's starting to become empowered and starting to realize how much power she's given away to these people that she's cared for and that she has felt that's cared for her. And so she's starting to rise in her power. She's starting to be able to connect with her purpose, and it's starting to take her in different directions in her life that are more fulfilling. That it's almost like you don't really know what you don't know, like you said. Well, that kind of happens, I think, through pretty much every age, right? And you said you're knocking on 50's door. I mean, how often do you turn around and say, "Hold on, am I really on the path that I want to be on? Is this really my purpose?" And then through these things that happens, these shifts, these internal and external shifts, you start to find new aspects of yourself, and new parts of yourself are born, and you start to explore that, and it just propels you into a whole new place in life. Or at least that's my experience, and a lot of the people that I work with.
Well, and I think that it'll propel you. I think you made a good point there. It will propel you into a new stage of life. If you're out of control and you don't have that
Hmm.
mastery, it'll put you in a place that you don't want to be. And,
Yeah.
through that example that you gave, and I've seen this as well, it's like you can either be the director of your life and you can choose the things that you want, or something else will choose it for you and you become a passenger. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that, when we work with coaching or you work with people, it's really, I always say that the awareness is the first step of the process for anything that you're doing. And if you can learn to be aware, you can catch that much earlier
Mm.
and allow
Yeah.
yourself to take control. And I think that's the empowerment that you're talking about is, do you feel like you're in the driver's seat of your life?
Yeah, and choice is everything, right? Because if you don't believe in choice, you don't believe in free will,
Mm-hmm.
right? And choice is the free will. And what I've learned through my time and through helping others and my own journey is that choice really is, and this is, I think, where people really go astray and they start to really struggle is when you want to change the things outside of you, there's an aspect that you must change before that happens, and that's the internal factors that drive it, right? And life is belief driven, right? And this is the difference between all of us. I mean, we're all out here in the same place on the same rock, spinning around the sun, but we're all very different because of our belief systems and the internal mechanics. And so, that choice, our choices propel us into everything we go into, whether we're consciously making those choices or not. And when you speak about awareness, awareness gives you deliberate choice. Without awareness, you don't have deliberate choice, or you don't know you're making those choices. But when you gain awareness, you gain deliberate choice. And that is a greater exercise of your free will, right? It's all about choice. And so choice really comes down to, and there's in a book that I've got coming out, one of the philosophies and principles of empowerment is understanding that we're creators, right? And that's all about choice. Right. And so what we do a lot of the times in life is we draw a line between the things that we choose and the things that we don't choose. Right. So the things we don't choose, we're a victim of.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But the things that we choose, we're not a victim of. But at some point in time, if you want real true empowerment and you really want control over your life, and control is it's really I guess a dirty word for it because it's you don't really have direct full control. It's really not about the externals that you control. The control factor really is based on that internal those internal processes, how you respond to things, how you define things, your belief systems. Those are the things you really truly have control over, which will then drive your actions, which will take you to the places that you go. But at some point in time, if you want more control over your life, you have to erase that line and start taking full responsibility, 100%. Now, maybe you didn't mean to do that to yourself. Maybe it wasn't deliberate. But if we can step back and gain a much bigger understanding, we can see that whether we meant to choose that or not, that is a result of one or many of our choices that we've made that has landed us here. And so when we gain awareness and we start to really examine ourselves in our lives, then we can start making more deliberate choices and become more of an active participant in how our life looks.
Hmm. So let's go into, I think 100% ownership. I think I love that. It's something that a lot of us always preach is like, yeah, take ownership of your choices. How do you work around not having someone beat themselves up by taking 100% ownership?
So you mean like, oh, this is my fault?
Yes, yeah, because I could see
Okay,
that
so
like that always kind of
yeah.
trickles in. It's like, okay, you take 100% ownership, but then you start to just beat yourself up because of all the choices you've made, or all, you're taking responsibility, but now you're maybe you're drowning in it.
So, when it comes to that, I'm a big advocate for treating yourself well because if you're beating yourself up and you're putting yourself down, I think the plain truth of the matter is that is a form of abuse and that makes you an abusive person. And you can't be so if somebody just starts putting blame on themselves, well, they've still got that line drawn because what they're doing is they're playing victim to themselves. That's not responsibility. And there's a difference, I think, in responsibility and accountability, right? When you take accountability, you acknowledge. right? It's like, oh, I did that. It's like if you mess up and you say, oh, I did that, I made a mistake, right? You're taking accountability. That's not responsibility. Responsibility is the ability to respond. And so if you just say, oh, I messed up, and you don't do anything about it and you don't correct it moving forward, well, you haven't taken responsibility. You haven't responded in a different way. That's just accountability. And so it really doesn't change anything. So if you're blaming yourself, well, you're not taking responsibility. You're still playing victim. You're just not playing victim to something outside of yourself. You're playing victim to yourself. Taking responsibility says, you know what? I did this. This didn't work out the way I wanted to. It worked out this way. Okay, what would I like to do about it moving forward? Rather than sitting and sulking and going into those places and getting all depressed or anxious, that's not responsibility. You're still just playing victim, but you're just playing it to yourself. It's like you're delusional to the fact that you're still just doing the same thing, just from a different space. Responsibility means you're willing to step up, acknowledge it, and release it while replacing it with something that's more effective.
Yeah, putting the effort in. And I laugh when you
Mhm.
say that because it's something I say to my daughter all the time. It's like, she'll come to me and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." I'm like, I don't want the sorry. I want
I want
the
the
action.
change.
I want the change,
Yeah.
right? I want the change. The sorry, I think we've all been tired of hearing sorry 1,000 times, but where's the
Yeah.
change? And, it's interesting because a lot of that stuff, I know I always try to instill in my children early on and get those lessons in while they're
Yeah.
still malleable.
Yeah, change. Like, I'm sorry. Well, that's great. Well, show me that you're sorry. Show me that you want to do better. Because if you just keep doing the same thing over and over and saying sorry, well, now your sorry doesn't hold any weight. It's not real. And so now I don't trust you. Show me. That's the best apology you can give is
Mhm.
change.
Mhm. So tell me, what are some of the things that you're working on now that you're really passionate about?
Well, I've got a book that I'm looking for, some publishers now that I want to put out this coming up year, and it really dives into my philosophy of empowerment and breaking down our fears. I think I talk about a philosophy of fear, and I think most of us live on this. If you look out into the world, most people are driven by their fears. They're not driven by their desires. It's like, oh, I want this because I don't want this,
Mm.
right? It's like,
Yeah, it's like when
like,
people will hold on,
yeah,
they'll put more energy into preserving what they have versus going after something new.
yeah, from a mindset of scarcity, right? I mean, it's like
Mm.
there's so many things that come back to fear. And what we do a lot of the times is we create these patterns of overcompensation, right? And so we're not actually going towards what we want. We're trying to get away from what we don't want, and that hinders us because that fear. I mean, fear has its place, but when it drives us, then we're not working from a place of empowerment, right? It doesn't mean that we can't do some really cool and really great things, but to open yourself up to greater things means that you got to step into a philosophy of empowerment. You got to be driven by things that are pure. You got to be moving toward things rather than trying to move away from things. And so I've got a philosophy. I've got a structure and a way I teach people to really stand in their power. I mean, I really think that that is the bottom line is working from a philosophy of empowerment. And one of those things is understanding the nature of life. We have what we call natural laws, and these are the laws that are applicable to all of us the same, kind of like gravity, right? We all work within the same structure of gravity, but we interact with it differently, and that's fine. But we all work under certain natural laws, like the laws of cause and effect, for example, right? It just is a natural law. It's immutable. It's the same for all of us, right? And just simple things like that can help us move into a space of really expressing ourselves fully, being authentic, right? Because that's another big issue I think that a lot of people have is, people are afraid of rejection. I think rejection is probably one of the most damaging things we go through, so we change ourselves. We put on these facades. We put on these a show for people. But if we can connect to our true full self, our authentic self, then we're going to have deeper connections in our lives. And when it comes to rejection and acceptance, which are I think some of the big drivers in my own life, And I think a lot of business owners go through this as well. They get scared about their products and really putting themselves out there because they're afraid of what people will say or think about them. But if we can truly fully stand in our authenticity, when we don't, it comes at the what I call, the greatest rejection, which is the rejection of the self, right? But to really own that, I think is going to help us stand out in the midst of that crowd and really, step in our passions and do what we came here to do. So really helping people move toward that space to let go of those fears, those driving factors that, guilts and shames and low self-esteem, which is, I think, at the core of just about every issue I've ever helped a person with is low self-esteem, the disbelief in themselves. So really building a person up to become empowered so they can go out into this world, be authentic and express themselves and their unique talents and gifts. And I think that that really is what's going to enhance the world. I mean, you look around, I mean, the world's in chaos right now, which I think ultimately will become a good thing because I think it'll help us understand ourselves better. We're kind of in an identity crisis in our country. And, you look at some of these other countries, they're in identity crisis. And I think that that's going to propel us into greater levels of ourselves if we allow it, but also on an individual level, if we can take in and look at ourselves and start examining ourselves through a lens of what I call truth, an objective truth, not this idea, oh, it works for everybody else, but I'm somewhat different. We kind of, a lot of people have that idea like, oh, I'm different, things don't work for me. And they treat other people better than they treat themselves. But if we can just start looking at ourselves through a lens of truth and see the reality of who we are and the divinity, I think, of what we are and our true value, it can allow us to go out and make a greater impact in the world.
Yeah, I do. I always believe that in chaos, there's opportunity. But I
Yeah.
also see this cycle, I think you can see it on a micro scale where it's an individual where, you can go through good times, you become a little soft, you become a little complacent, or, it's time for you to elevate to the next level and you need that painful change. I've seen that now
Yeah.
on a more macro scale, with governments, policies, everything else. It's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe we've let ourselves go. Maybe it's time
Yeah.
for us to endure a little bit of pain because of the fact that we need to, reset our expectations, reset what we're capable of doing. And and the truth is it's not going to be for everyone. I think that that's the other thing
Right.
is that, some people are going to average down. And this is
Mhm.
really this work is really for those people who don't want to settle for the average down, or they don't want to live in fear. Because I think that's
Yeah.
something I know I've experienced in my own personal life. It's, yeah, you'll face struggles, and I think we'll all lay on our back at some point and be like, oh my God, like, is this ever going to end? And there's a
Yeah.
little voice. I think there's a voice in us that either says, yeah, just lay here, or
Yeah.
get up.
Yep. And you got the, I mean, what are they? There's an old story about the two wolves or something like that. Which one are you going to listen to? Absolutely. And that goes back to that pain threshold, right? When we cross that pain threshold, well, that's what we become aware, right? So you look at the breakdown, I mean, I think it may be a process of entropy where now the system it's outgrown itself, it's no longer working, it breaks down, goes through that phase of chaos so that it can restructure and reorganize at a higher level. And so, because of that breakdown, we go through this pain, and that helps us to become aware so that we can make better choices moving forward. And these are natural parts of life. And one of the things that baffles me, and I did this throughout my life as well, but we start to go through these things in life, and we're like, I don't understand, right? Like, let's say you make a plan, and all of a sudden, life throws a monkey wrench in your plans, and you're like, I can't believe it. I can't believe this happened. What do you mean you can't believe this happened? This has always happened because that's the way this system of life works. And it's like we have these, and it doesn't make any sense because it negates the actual experience that we've ever had in life. Like someone that says, "Oh, I don't like change." Well, you've been changing your whole life. What do you mean you don't like change? You absolutely love change. You don't want to sit still. And so it's like it's like we're unaware of the true reality of life. But this pain brings that awareness to us and it says, hey, you're going to move, whether you like it or not, because one of the principles of life is about change. And you can't escape that. You can stand still in life and it will still change. You cannot escape it. So why not embrace that? Why not learn how to manage those storms in life and to allow them to work to help you, to refine you rather than define you? Because you're going to go through them regardless of whether you want to or not. So
And
why
I
not
think
just step
that's
into it?
yeah, that's I think that's something though that has been a non-existent in our culture in our society for the
Yeah.
last 20, 25 years is that there is this narrative and this belief, you nailed it. We've been told over and over and over again that you just do X, Y, and Z and you'll hit this zenith and then it's happily ever after. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that I know I'm doing with my generation of children, on teaching them that, putting adversity in front of them versus removing obstacles, like sitting
Yes.
beside them, because isn't that just what we do as coaches, is that we can't overcome the obstacle for you, but we're going to be there beside you as you progress through the obstacle. And the
Yeah.
muscle you need to build, the resistance you need to build, the grit, like we need a little grit. And in these cycles, this is where it's built.
Absolutely. That's the growth. Like you are here to grow, to evolve, right? And if you just look across humanity, you always have new desires. It's like, oh, if I just get here, then I'll be happy, I'll be da 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 da. And then you get there and you already want to be somewhere else because that's the process of evolution. That's what we're designed to do. When you stop desiring, you start to die, right? And we see this with people that retire and they stop and they sit and then they wither away because they lost their desires. Desires keep us alive. And so we want to embrace those struggles, those storms of life. So many people they're trying to avoid feeling things that are uncomfortable. But there's so much power when you learn how to become comfortable in the discomforts of life. It's like, oh, I don't want problems. Well, you do want problems. There's a purpose to problems. Problems are here to change you, and you want to change. And so instead of trying to avoid things, doesn't it seem, I guess, more reasonable to say, hey, I'm going to experience struggles through my life. I'm going to go through guilt. I'm going to go through shames. I'm going to go through disappointments. I'm going to go through heartaches. Wouldn't it be more realistic to say, I want to learn how to handle those things really well when they come up, rather than trying to avoid them, which is what most people do?
Yeah, and it's funny. As you were talking, I started thinking about our mastermind and some of the speakers that we've had. And, one of our speakers always stands out in my mind is Dennis Waitley. Dennis Waitley comes in and speaks at our, annually to our group, and he's in his 90s and he's in, like various health issues, everything else, but, he's still finding purpose. And I think it's the purpose that drives us. It's the purpose to wake up the next day and do what we're doing. And what I always thought was interesting about one of the comments he makes is that his happiest years were between like 65 and 85.
Most people wouldn't think that, right? We're like, oh, I want to be in my 20s again. No thanks.
Yeah, and I just when I heard him say it, especially because every time I think we come to these milestone years, like for me, approaching 50, I look at it going, man, if his best years were from 65 to 85, oh man, like this is all the best is still in front. And I think
Yeah.
it's how do we create that best? It's by purpose, being purpose driven. I would even go past the desire driven, but purpose driven because,
Yeah.
passions, desires, they can wane. Like, when you have them, once you catch that kind of, gold ticket, it loses its luster, but the purpose that stays with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Purpose will drive you. I mean, you always start with the why. If you don't know why you're doing it, you're likely going to fizzle out, or you're going
Mhm.
to get lost and you're going to end up where you wanted to be, and you're going to be confused, and you're just going to kind of go through this breakdown process. Purpose drives you. I always start when I start working with a client, one of the first things I do is I get them to fill out this, like, what I call a purpose card. Why are you in this program? What do you want to change about yourself in your life? And why do you want to change that about yourself in your life? Because what it does is, because growth is a process, and we tend to think about it as a thing that we do, but it's not. It's a process. It's not a thing. It's a process of becoming, not a process of doing. There's a lot of doing in there, but When you're shifting, you're shifting your consciousness, you're shifting your identity, right? Because we don't get in life what we want, we get in life what we are. And so if you want this new venture, you've got to become the character that gets that. You've got to think that way, you've got to interact that way, you have to have a strategy that aligns with that. You got to align the thoughts, the choices, the actions. Everything must come into an alignment with that. And so if you don't have a purpose, it's kind of like you're just using willpower. And I think about willpower as like a spark plug to a car. It'll help it get started, but it's not going to keep it running. That's not its job. You
Yeah.
got to find some deeper meaning of why you're doing what you're doing. And that will help you get through those doldrums and those low spots, because you're going to go through the low spots. It's not just all, going up. It's not about that. That's just unrealistic.
So, it's funny you talked about like the first questions you ask somebody. I think we all do this where we're like, okay, what's your purpose? How do you handle the phrase I don't know?
Well, I always say to begin living with purpose, you must first begin living on purpose. So start taking, account for what's going on right now, right? You don't have to know. I mean, typically the beginning of a path never starts with clarity of the end result. It typically just says, okay, like for example, I have this one guy. We went through I think 4 months before he actually really started his path of growth. But he needed to go through those 4 months of going and doing this and, you know, going through the pain, and he had to hit rock bottom. And it took him about 4 months to hit rock bottom. And so once he started that shift, it began with, you know what? I want to be a man of integrity. I want to start being honest about the things that I'm doing. And just that's enough purpose to start to move you in that direction. And then from that, he gained a new purpose. Okay, well, I've achieved that. I'm being honest. I'm being a man of integrity. So what's next? And then it's like, well, I'd really like this. And so it's a step-by-step process. And I think a lot of people are waiting for the big picture. But the reality is, we don't know what the big picture looks like. We can, you can create a vision board, right? And that's a wonderful thing. But all that does is it elicits a state. Like when you really think about what it's going to be like when you reach your goal, you have no idea, right? That you have no idea what that's really going to look like. And so to think that you can start out and make your way to that I guess that vision that you've created, that arbitrary vision that you've created, well, you've got to be fluid in your path. So the
Mhm.
clarity is, I want more than what I have now, and I want it in this way. But as you walk through that path of growth, that's going to change. So that's all I always say, hold on loosely. Let life guide you. Life will guide you. It's not our job to decide how things are going to happen, and we often can't. It's life's job, and life will take care of that. Life will do that for you. Life is always here to help us. Those pains, those strains, those storms, all of that stuff is to shape us and mold us along our path. And life is never wrong. It never takes us down the wrong path. And we can choose a path that doesn't serve us, but maybe it does serve us, in some bigger way that we're just not aware of at the moment. But the purpose really is about, okay, what can you do right now? What do you want to do and why do you want to do it? Right? It's really about moving away from where you're at, but that can start, building a greater purpose. That's the way it happened for me. I didn't have a bigger purpose that I was reaching for. I just had desires, right? I was like, oh, I want this. And so I would go for that. And through that, through that process of developing my character, I gained a bigger purpose, and that's shifted my path, and that's given me kind of that fulfillment.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I know I work with leaders, and when I'm developing leaders, and they're like, "Well, I want a promotion," and it's like, "Okay, who do you have to become in order to step into that role?" And that's
It's all
usually,
about that.
yeah, who do you have to become? Because I think that's the best question: is you want something bigger, you want something better. Okay, who are you? Who do you have to become? What are the reps that you've got to take to become that person and then step into it? Because I believe once you work and you become that person, then the opportunity appears.
I wish everyone knew this. Like that is really at the core of it, right? That is the true message. And I think where we get, we start, just chasing this because we think that this This is what's going to change me. For example, weight loss, right? I had a young girl last night that I was working at. She'll be 19 in a few days, and she made a comment about she hates her body, the way her body looks. And I'm like, whoa, 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 hold on, what do you mean? She's like, well, I ate a lot of stuff over Thanksgiving. I've gained some weight through this and that, and you know, I said, okay, well, what happens when you lose the weight? Well, I'll feel good about myself, and I'll be confident. I'll look better. I said, okay, first of all, you're going to look the same. You're going to look like you. Second, if you want to release that weight and you think that once you release that weight, you're going to feel confident, you're going to have a healthy self-esteem. Well, if you truly want to release that weight and not gain it back, then work on becoming confident and work on your self-esteem. Become the person, the version of yourself who lives without that weight. Then it'll be a natural, thing that you produce and have in your life.
Well,
That's where it's at.
that's what's interesting. That's a great example. I think the weight loss where people are like, "I'm gonna be better then when I'm there," and it's like when you describe, when you ask somebody, you start to dig deep and you start to get the all of the things. None of it has anything to do with having a lighter body,
Yep.
right? It's all the other that you can
Yep.
embody that now. I see that with leadership all the time. I'm like, you don't have to get promoted to be a leader. You
Yeah.
can be a leader right where you are, and then you can find opportunities after. And I always begin very much how you do. It's like, okay, I focus on your strengths. What are your strengths? That's who
Yeah.
you are. What's you? What's your unique power? And let's just let's chip away the marble and release the sculpture underneath, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because it doesn't really make sense when you step back and look at it objectively. It's like, oh, I need this position to be the leader that I want. Well, being a leader has nothing to do with that company, that position. That position's made up. Look, we live in a world of make believe. Every single thing that has ever been created by a human came from the imagination. We literally live in a world of imagination expressed. It's all made up. The businesses are made up, the structures are made up, the governments are, everything is made up. Everything. And so when you think that all of these things are going to give you what you want, well, it's an illusion. It's not real. It's not real.
I love that you just nailed. I say that all the time. Everything's made up. For me, I learned that finally in my 40s that everything's made up. Once I learned that, it was like a relief to actually
Yeah.
say it out loud. Like, this is all made up,
It's all made up.
and you can unmake it, you can remake it, you can do whatever you want to do because at the end of the day, none of this is real. you
None
know?
of it's real. That's the beauty. Like, if you want to change something in your life, because life is reflective, right? Everybody's life reflects them. It's kind of like I think about it as like a light bulb. Like, we're the element. So the belief systems, what we call the identity, that's the element, and that decides the glow around, right? That aura around that light, and within that aura, that's the reality. And every one of us live in a different reality. Our realities reflect ourselves, our beliefs. So if you have an issue in your external world, you want to go inside and figure out, how did I create that? What part of me, what belief system did I have to have in order to be in a situation like that? And that's how life shows us what's going on inside of us. Right. So, and there's where our free will is, right? To go in and cultivate a different character. If we don't like what we've got, well, we're creators. We can go in and we can change that, but you have to change it in the imagination. I mean, this is where things like visualization kick in. It's all about the imagination. Hypnotherapy, it's all about the imagination. And these things work. These are the most potent tools out there for changing your life. Is imagination. You go out there and you look at some of the greatest athletes, some of the greatest stars, and they're like, oh, I've been here 10,000 times in here, and now I'm here because that's the way it works.
Mhm. Yeah, I
It's an
read this
inside
one
out
book.
world.
I read this one book where there was a study done on basketball players, and they took a high school basketball team, and they had a group of people that would shoot the free throws, like 100 free throws every day. Another group that would just visualize shooting free throws, 100 times a day, and then one group that didn't. And the percentages for the visualizers were very, very close to the ones who actually shot the shots. And I thought that was really cool because even just the mindset of practicing it put them closer to the practice. So you couple them together and it's like out of the water. So you're 100% right. The mind does control it. And again, like we said, it's all made up. Like all of
It's
this
all
came
made
from our
up.
minds. Otherwise,
Every
we'd
bit
be
of it.
naked in a jungle eating, berries from a tree.
Yep. Yep, it's all made up. And so if you don't like the story, you change it. But we have to change it here. And when we change it here, it will then change out here. And a lot of the times it will change outside of us with very minimal effort. And I teach this, and a lot of people, I know you gotta work hard. You gotta work hard, you gotta work long hours, you gotta but it's not true. If it were true, then people wouldn't make it by not doing it. And you look around, I mean, you got, especially these young people, they'll hold their phones and do stupid things, and they're very rich from doing it. So if the truth was that you have to work really, really hard and lose sleep and get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to make it, well, then how are people making it, not doing it? It's not true. But if you believe it, guess what you're going to be? Under that belief, and it's going to take that for you, but it doesn't take that for you. In fact, kind of like what I wrote in my chapter, my what I learned and how I became successful. I mean, I remember clocking 14,000 some dollars on my taxes, and then by surrendering, going through some of the most painful times of my life, and surrendering and actually giving up chasing things. Well, I think what we call the law of detachment, just kind of like, you know what, I'm not going to hold on so tightly. I'm just going to kind of surrender to life. I'm going to let life guide me. I'm going to see what life has in store for me, because obviously what I'm doing is not working. And I'm kind of tired of going in these cycles and building myself up and falling and failing all, over and over and over, year after year. So finally, I just kind of gave up, and I'm like, life, you do it. You show me where to go. I'm not going to move until you tell me where to go. And like 6 months later, man, these doors of abundance start to open. Next thing you know, I'm raking in six figures. I mean, everything just blows up. And it took so much less work to create success in my life than it ever did when I was trying. I wasn't successful when I was trying to force it into existence, which means I was focusing on everything outside of myself. But when I surrendered, I started focusing on everything inside myself. What kind of man do I want to be? Right? If I'm just going to be broke and struggling the rest of my life, how can I come to peace with that? How can I still be a man, the man that I want to be, a man who's, a man of integrity, a man who's fulfilled, a man who can be satisfied and content along that path, even going through these things that I've been going through my whole life? How can I just become, I guess, at peace and at ease with this? And through that process, that's when I actually became successful. I stopped trying to change everything outside of me, and I started focusing on myself and growth and becoming the man that I wanted to be. And then that translated into great success in so many things that I never would have gotten to experience. And it's the only strategy that has never stopped working for me.
Oh,
It's the
that's
only
awesome.
one.
So let me ask you, I know you're coming up with a new book. Your contribution to the Rich Code, was that your first authoring experience?
No, I produced a book in 2020 called Fight Back: End the Cycles of Anxiety and Depression. And it's based on how I teach people how to completely eliminate debilitating anxiety and depression. And this was an area that I focused on for many, many years. And it still comes up a whole lot because there's so many people that have anxiety and depression these days. And they just don't understand it, right? I mean, we've been indoctrinated into, conditioned into believing, what our culture teaches, but it's so much bigger than that. Right. I mean, it's not all about work and industry, and we devalue ourselves because we're not producing as much as this person or that person. And so helping people overcome that stuff. And I mean, you can completely eliminate debilitating anxiety and depression, right? And in fact, I will go as far as to say they are actually choices in your life. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, if you got anxiety, you're choosing to have anxiety. What I'm saying, though, is that your choices on a regular basis that you make are what's propelling a life filled with anxiety and depression. And you can make different choices, but you have to start with that knowledge, right? Because that knowledge brings an awareness, and that awareness can take you into a deeper understanding. And with that deeper understanding, you can start practicing different things, and you can change your life. I've done it. I got rid of suicidal ideation, addictive behaviors, debilitating anxiety and depression. I mean, all kinds of things. They're all just, it's like a past life. They just don't exist because they're not part of the man I've become, right?
And
They can't,
that's
the man that I was can't even stand in the shadow of the man I've become.
Yeah, and I think that's also speaking to like I've experienced anxiety and struggle with anxiety and all those other things, and it's interesting because I can't say that I'm on the other side and it's gone. But when I experience it now, I can look at it, I can handle it, I can hold it in my hands, I can feel it, I can experience it. It's not overwhelming. It's just there like any other emotion that I feel because that's all it is. It's just another one of the spectrum of emotions that we get as human beings. And just like I'm not going to let anger overrule my life, and it probably, even joy at some point, you don't want it to be there 24/7 because there are times you want to be sad and there are times you want to,
Sure.
you should have, there should be a little level of anxiety because it is something new. It could also be excitement, right? It could, like, I don't want to eliminate excitement from my spectrum of emotions either.
Right. And that goes back to the idea of, hey, I want to completely get rid of anxiety. No, you don't. Anxiety's got a place. There's a place for anxiety. It's not there to hurt you. It's there to help you, right? The debilitating aspect is when you're running from it, right? And
Mhm.
if you run from it, look, you can't get away from yourself, right? But we're disillusioned thinking that everything is created from outside of us and these things are having an impact, but they're not. It's your definition, how you define things, how you believe about things. That is what you're experiencing. You don't experience anything outside of you. Nothing. Like two people, like say somebody from, Washington State, Seattle, they go outside and it's kind of raining, it's gloomy outside. They're like, "Oh, what a beautiful day." Because they're used to this. They love this type of weather, right? And we're down here like, "Oh, that's a terrible, nasty day. Gosh, it's raining, it's nasty out today." Well, what is it? Is it nasty or is it beautiful? Well, it's neither.
Well,
It doesn't
Mike,
have a
I moved
meaning.
from Canada to Orange County, California, and I'm going to tell you, every single day I walk outside and I've got a smile from ear to ear. All the Californians are always cold, and I'm like, yes, whatever. Like this is paradise, right?
This
So
is
yeah,
beautiful.
I get to switch that. Let me switch gears a little bit for and ask you a little bit. What brought you into our group? Like, why did you want to become a member, contribute to our mission and our mastermind?
I love this series. I love Cracking the Rich Code because it really is all about, and when you hear the name Cracking the Rich Code, you automatically, or I think a person would automatically think this is about money, but it's not, right? It might have something to do with money here and there, but the rich code, having a rich life, is really about understanding life in a way that produces that experience for you. And I think I have a lot to share on that because that's exactly what I've created, a life that was suffocated with suffering and pain and debilitation. And now I live a very, very rich life. Right. I've got those things I want to share with people when they work. I've been doing this work for over 13 years now, and the way that people's lives transform and seeing that is it's something that's hard to describe. It's that experience. It's beautiful. It's magical, and I really want to share my message with the world. Because I was one of those people that nothing ever worked for. I
Mhm.
tried this, I tried that, and programs and books and even coaches and counselors, and nothing ever worked for me. But what I've put together through my own healing, I'm able to work for those people and help those people that nothing works for. And that's a beautiful thing. And so I think there's a lot of people like that out there, like me, who just can't seem to, get the help that they want or that they need. And so I try to stand in the gap for those.
Yeah, and that's why one of the things I love about the series too is that you pick up any of the volumes and there's 20 authors, right? And 20 voices, 20 teachers, 20 mentors, 20 stories, for each one
Yeah,
of them. And you may not resonate with all of them, and you're not supposed to, but you'll
that's right.
resonate with the ones that you need to resonate with, and you'll hear the stories and you'll read the stories that you do need to read. And I think that that really is the power of the series and the book. And even that, like our mastermind, when I said when I joined, um, it wasn't even the book. The book writing experience for me really opened up my eyes to what was possible on another end. But then
Yeah,
when I saw the community, I'm like, oh my God, I get to be exposed to all these people. That's like,
I
this is
love it.
unheard of. This is fantastic.
Yes, I love our masterminds. I mean, they're so informative. Like, Joshua Boswell coming in, he was great. I mean, they're just really informative, and it's nice to be connected. It's nice to be part of something bigger than yourself, and to be a support system for others, but also to learn from them and gain those different perspectives and diversify, because that expansion really does go a long way. I think for us as business owners and coaches and people that are out here trying to help other people, to be exposed to other people who are sharing their ways of helping others as well. And I think it just really it diversifies us and makes us better.
Yeah, I agree. And just take this 1 second to promote the Rich Code. Those of you who are watching, listening, if you're watching the replay, we are always accepting new authors for the series. I believe right now we're on volume 17. I can't believe it's just a few months ago when I was promoting volume 15. So, this is a great community of people who want to share a story. So if you're a coach, a speaker, an author, if you have something that you want to share, a story that you want to put into a series that's going to become, each volume is a bestseller. Like this is, Amazon bestseller each time because it's that much in demand to read the quality that's being put out there and to, be a part of that. I encourage you to reach out to myself, reach out to Jim Britt directly. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Pete Beskus actually around, so it's easy to find me. And I encourage you to come and join our Rich Code. I'd love to interview you next time on this podcast. So before we wrap up for today, Mike, what's something you want to leave our audience with that maybe we didn't chat about?
Well, if you're struggling out there, if you're going through a difficult time, I think a lot of people separate business and personal problems. I don't think that there's a separation. I think that they're all combined. Um, really want to succeed, or you really want to change an aspect of your life, do your work outside, do those things that you need to do, put those things in place outside of you. But the most important thing that you're going to be able to do, and the most successful thing, at least in my experience in helping others for as long as I have, is you got to go in and you got to work on the internal mechanics. You got to go in, you got to redefine yourself and decide, who is that character that you truly want to be, and root yourself in that purpose and allow life to take you on that journey, and trust life and trust yourself that you're going to build those skills. Prepare for a journey. It's not a thing that you're doing. It's something that you invest yourself in. And that means you're investing yourself in the ups and the downs, and just work on becoming better as a person. And in my experience, that will take you exactly where you most want to go, and where you're planning on going. Let go of the path. Don't try to figure out how it's going to happen. Just hold on, have faith, and give it all you got.
Great. I'm actually going to take some of that advice as well because, I think we can all hold too tightly onto our ideas. So thank you so much for this. This was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I can't wait to see you in the next mastermind, Mike.
I did as well. Thank you so much.
Uh, all right. And to the rest of every you who are watching, thank you for watching. And I'll see you all in the next